Welcome to the Popko Project Podcast, a platform for the discussion and discovery of arts and entertainment. We focus on highlighting people and events that add value to the world around us. Visit us on all social media platforms by searching the Popko Project or visit our website at thepopkoproject.com. Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for listening. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Keller's Garden Center and Landscaping Services. Are you still cutting your own grass? Are you still trying to get your landscaping to look perfect on your own? That sounds sweaty. That sounds like a lot of work. That sounds like a job for Keller's Garden Center and Landscaping Services. Family owned and operated, Keller's Garden Center and Landscaping Services, located on Kern Street in Exeter near Blue Ribbon Dairy, has the quality and experience to get your yard looking its best. The Garden Center offers plants, trees, sod, mulch, rocks, flowers, topsoil, grass seed, straw bales, and much more, while the Lawn and Landscaping Services offers mowing, trimming, planting, and full landscaping. And also new at Keller's Garden Center is the Zen Chaser Bonsai Studio, offering bonsai trees, supplies, and classes. Visit them on their social media page for more info. Keller's Garden Center and Landscaping Services. Get your free estimate today. This episode is also brought to you by Paulson Tours. For almost 30 years, this family-owned and operated business has been sending people to sports games, racing events, concerts, vacations, and more. I myself have been using Paulson Tours for trips to Red Sox games, wine festivals, and an annual guys trip to Boston for St. Paddy's Day for almost 15 years. Check out the current trips being offered over at paulsontours.com. Life's a trip. Go with Paulson Tours. Dan, how you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you.
No, thank you, man. I really appreciate the time. I said earlier that this platform is, I started it to talk to entertainers and artists and things like that, and I think 90% of it's probably musicians, but I've also talked to authors and chefs and things like that. So I'm happy to get, you are also an author, but a tattooer, an author, a podcaster. I don't know when you find the time to sleep.
Yeah, my girl yells at me all the time. She's like, "You don't have any time. You're always busy." So
they're good at that.
Yeah, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Yeah,
that's what I say too. But Dan Henk. It's hard to not sound like you're saying Hank, but it's Henk, Henk.
You know what it probably is? It's a very common German first name. And my grandfather moved here right before the war. Like everyone in Ellis Island, if they had like this complex German last name, they just go, "Okay, what's your first name?" "Okay, that's it."
Nice. Well, it's funny. I heard your name through my years. Through you're doing a guest spot, and maybe you've done more around here, but specifically 570 Tattooing Company with Ron Russo. Shout out Ron.
Right.
He did my first half sleeve.
Ron very well. Yeah,
he did my first half sleeve way back in the day, 2007 into 2008. So it's been a minute, and I haven't seen Ron in a long time. I follow him on Facebook and social media. It looks like he's doing well, but I've always saw your name attached to that tattoo shop, and so I'm excited to kind of talk to you, and you have quite a story. Your quick bio reads that you were homeless, you were stabbed by a crackhead, and you beat brain cancer, and now you're a successful author, tattoo artist, podcaster, all that, and we'll get into all that. But first, tell me and my listeners, who is Dan Henk, outside of what I just mentioned?
Well, there's a running theory I'm a cyborg. I don't know if I subscribe to that or if it's just like some glitch in the matrix or whatever, but I'm just a guy who's trying to do things through life, and sometimes it's a lot harder than other times. Sometimes obstacles come up, but my running goal is I'll try and make it work. No matter what happens, I just keep going.
And talk about your upbringing, where you're from.
Well, my dad's Army, so I've moved all around. I lived in Germany, I lived in North Carolina, I lived in Florida, and then I lived in Virginia. And after I left home, I lived in Texas. I live in New York right now. I own a shop here in New York. I've been back to PA a number of times, both do guest spots. I worked at Deep Six, Paul Ecker's shop for a while. Then I moved back here. Then I moved and worked at Third Dimension, which is Brian Murphy's shop. Brian Murphy's a good friend of me and Ron. And then I moved back here, and now I run a shop.
Very cool. So you're, I guess you're well traveled.
I tried to make it around. I tried to do vacations, and like I found out with conventions, like people think it's awesome with conventions and guest spots. You can go anywhere, and it is cool, but you often don't get to see much. You just go inside a tattoo studio and spend all day just working on tattoos. And often, if you come from somewhere far away, then people want to get something dramatic and big from you, and you want to oblige, and you end up spending all day working on that tattoo.
What's that like doing, the guest spots where you're traveling to a shop where people are like, oh man, like I gotta book an appointment at 570, for instance, with Dan Henk. He's going to be in town for a day or 2 days or whatever it is. Like, that's kind of got to be a cool, like, I mean, you get to a level where people like seek you out. That's pretty neat.
Right. Well, I feel like in my 15 minutes of fame, when I was like in all the magazines and people were inviting me to do guest spots at conventions overseas. Sometimes they even pay for my plane flight, but they'd always pay for my booth or my hotel, and they usually give me 100%. It was, like I said, that was like right when I had my 15 minutes of fame. So I think that the idea was, kind of like Nike will sponsor people. You bring people in that make you look good.
Yeah. And talk about your 15 minutes of fame. What kind of magazines were you in?
I was in a lot. I mean, everything from like smaller magazines, like there's a magazine just called Pain. I was in that. I've been, I don't know how many tattoo magazines, Skin Art, Skin Deep, Tattoo Review, Hardcore Tattoos, Tattoos for Men, Tattoo Magazine. They have one called the Swedish Tattoo Magazine. Yeah, I don't know, a lot.
Right.
Plus, there's a lot of books. Like that was the era where like a lot of people like to capture tattoo artists. Like Mike Freeze did Prodigy's 1 and 2. 2 also has Ron Russo in it. But he's like, hey, new people that are coming up the scene, I'll put them in there. So, you'd have a couple of pages in there. It's kind of
cool.
nice to be like in this big hardcover book,
That's awesome. That's one thing about art. It's just like, it lasts essentially, it could last forever, right? Like, even when you're gone, right? Like your art will, live on someone's skin, in magazines and books and hanging on walls in people's houses. That's like kind of got to be a neat thing to think about.
Right. Well, especially if you do something that's like a little bit more like unique, as opposed to somebody who just like follows the latest trends and bangs whatever is popular at the moment out. That tends not to last beyond like that 10-year lifespan of that popular image or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, did tattooing find you, or did you find it? Like, how did you get into the industry?
Well, I always wanted to be. I couldn't decide if I wanted to be a writer or an artist, and then I read like some of the first really advanced comic books, like Watchmen and The Dark Knight Rises. And I was like, oh, you can do both. And I went to art school on my own dime after I got away from being homeless. And I remember my art teacher said, if you want to make it as an artist, you got to move to New York. So I moved to New York, and I had an opportunity to apprentice back when I was like 19, and I was thinking that tattoos were all like the kind of like what Mike Ness has, like the small traditional American tattoos. And I always liked that. I wanted to be covered in it, but I was like, I don't want to do that for a living. And then when I moved to New York, while I was like, I went to Penguin Books, I interviewed with DC Comics and stuff. And, I was doing a lot of band art, and a lot of bands, they don't pay. It like, you're like, oh, it's such a great band, but it turns out they're like 24-year-old kids. And, they keep pressuring you to get artwork done, do the artwork. You're like, hey, man, I got to pay rent. Can I get some money? And they go, oh, talk to the label. And you talk to the label, and the label goes, well, we give them an advance, and part of that advance goes towards paying for the cover art. And then you talk to the musician, and he goes, oh, I didn't know that. I already spent it. So then I was like trying to figure out how I could pay the bills doing artwork. And I had a friend of my brother's who saw my paintings, and he's like, he should learn how to tattoo. And he taught me how to tattoo. And I figured I would tattoo until I got a, quote, real job, and I just liked it so much. I've stuck with it ever since. It's kind of like right now, even if like say Hollywood bought one of my scripts and I made a ton of money, I wouldn't give up tattooing. I tattoo less. I'd only tattoo the projects I really, really am into, but I still do it because I enjoy it.
Yeah. And what are you into? What do you specialize in?
Kind of dark realism. I wouldn't say it's horror per se. I've been tagged as like the horror artist for the longest time. Before that, I was kind of tagged as like the H.R. Geiger guy, because a lot of guys wouldn't do like the kind of detailed, intricate biomechanics that H.R. Geiger does. So I actually did that, and I got so tired of doing nothing but that I stopped doing that for a while. I refused to do any Geiger stuff. But I kind of got pigeonholed into being the horror guy, and I enjoy horror, but it's like I feel like dark imagery is a wide spectrum, and there's a lot of stuff that I kind of draw influence from that I enjoy doing. And it's not necessarily what's the goriest or like the most iconic. It's what I think is most interesting.
And it's funny, like I feel like artists kind of tend to get labeled as something, regardless of what they want to do. You guys kind of said you were like the horror guy, and a lot of guys are pigeonholed into like portraits and things like that. Like, was it hard to kind of break out of that per se, like so to speak?
I think, well, one is the danger that like you'll hear from like a lot of Hollywood actors and stuff, like they get stereotyped into one specific role, and you kind of get that with tattooing. Like, this is what he does. Like I remember for a while I was working down in Texas, and a guy came to me to get a skull because he heard, if you want a skull, you got to go to Dan Henk. So I was like the skull horror guy, and I'd even have people that wanted like something more generic or more genial, like a portrait of a family member, and they try and like shift it over into a kind of a horror spectrum. So because I thought that would be what they would need to get me to do it. But anything realistic that kind of grabs my attention, I enjoy doing.
And how long have you been doing this for?
Tattooing, a little over 23 years.
23 years. I always hear of tattooers having back problems. Is that true?
I've heard that nonstop from a lot of people I work with. It hasn't happened to me, but I do a lot of stretching because I'm also big into MMA. So I do jiu-jitsu, and I do
No kidding.
I'm a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. Well, blue belt 2 stripes. I did Jeet Kune Do. I'm second level Jeet Kune Do. I do Muay Thai. Muay Thai doesn't really have belts, but I'm a black white Kerrang, which is it's pretty high up on the scale. Like a black Kerrang means you're a teacher. I did Taekwondo for years. I'm a secondary black belt in Taekwondo. I won a gold medal at the Virginia Championships. So like I do a lot of stretching and I do a lot of exercising, and I think that helps keep you like fluid and flexible. And with tattooing, you like tend to sit and lean over and work on something for hours at a time. And if you don't stretch that muscle and you don't exercise that muscle, it causes a lot of problems.
Yeah. How did you get into jiu-jitsu and stuff like that?
Well, when I was in high school, I got really into punk rock, Like I had a blue mohawk, I had
Nice.
a spiky leather jacket. Like I looked like a British punk rocker.
Okay.
And this was in Virginia, and Virginia back in the late 80s, early 90s was not receptive to that at all. So I'd get my ass kicked all the time. Like, you'd just be walking down the street. You obviously look way different than everyone else. And, people would roll by in the pickup truck and be like, hey, faggot. You'd be like, oh, fuck your mom. And then, 5 guys would jump out and they'd beat your ass. So, like, I had my nose broken 3 times, and there were a lot of Nazi skins at the time, and most of the girls I date aren't white, so that would be a big problem. And eventually, I just got tired of getting my ass kicked. So I'm like, I'm going to learn how to fight. So that was kind of the genesis of that. And then after I learned how to fight, you get in very few fights. So it's kind of funny how that works.
But at least you're prepared.
Well, I think so.
And
I mean, if somebody pulls a gun on me, I mean, despite all the videos you see, that's bullshit. If somebody pulls a gun, you give them your wallet.
Right. Yeah, don't be a hero, right?
Yeah.
Well, plus that kind of that combat is kind of like close combat. You don't want to fuck with a guy with a gun, right?
With a gun or a knife, yeah.
Right.
I think Bruce Lee famously said if somebody pulled a knife on him, he would just give over his wallet. Like, it's like even Bruce Lee was like, yeah, I don't want to play around, because like most people who get in knife fights die. I think there's like, even if they have the knife, if the other guy also has the knife, there's like a 30% survival rate.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, I can't fight, so I don't fight. I would definitely be the one to give up my wallet. I'm trying to get my kid into some form of like karate just for self-defense, because I mean the world is a mean place. I mean, obviously you dealt with a lot of shit. I mean, and obviously I'm not going to be around all the time. And even if I am, I'm not going to fight another child. So it's like I just want him to kind of like be familiar and just kind of get some techniques down just to defend himself in case he were to come across any kind of trouble.
Well,
But
if he's more familiar, or if he's if there are studios near you, I'd put him in a Muay Thai studio, because Muay Thai is way better than karate.
Muay Thai, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has no interest in that kind of stuff. He's a sweet kid. He's like, I mean, I'm not, like, again, I don't fight. I don't do any of that kind of stuff. I'm always intrigued by it. I'm always curious about it. I keep saying like I'm too old to get involved in it. I know that that's not true, but in my mind, I just say like, oh, I can't start that now. I'm too old. But yeah, he's not an aggressive kid, so like he sees that kind of stuff, and I don't think he like is necessarily drawn to it. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, it's not like street fighting. It's not like, you go there and it's all thugs and they just want to beat the crap out of you. It's
Right.
You learn a lot of technique. You learn a lot of self-confidence. You learn a lot of stuff that just like, I think makes you a better person.
Yeah, I just saw Lex Friedman.
There he is. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant guy. I think I forget what he was saying, but he said he learned more on the mats doing, I think, jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, which is also what I recommend.
Yeah, what he said, he learned more doing that than he ever learned in school or any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, my son's only 5 years old, so maybe I'll convince him in the next couple of years, but. But
well, like I said, it's not like thuggery where, like, all right, just go out back and put it out. It's like, it's more like, especially that age, like they focus on technique and stuff like
right.
that. Stuff like that is very good.
I know.
And like I said, once you learn how to fight, you don't get that many fights.
Right, which is good. It's like when you buy a 4-wheel drive car. It never snows. That happened to me before. But dude, I mean, like you have this, like I mentioned before, author, you're martial arts and things like that. You're a tattoo artist. Talk a little bit about the other things. I think you just have a book you just released recently, right?
Yeah, I've been doing this for quite a while, and it's kind of hard to find what to focus on. Like I did a horror calendar for 3 years, and I get people like Chazar put something there. Like Chazar did some of the illustrations for the band Tool, and I had a bunch of people that I thought were really good artists that were contributing to it, but like after 3 years, it was just a pain in the ass, and there was no real. Like you barely broke even. You're spending all the time working on it. I did cartoons for Tattoo Arts magazine for a couple of years. It's like, I keep going from one thing to another until I try and find a niche where like I can enjoy myself and express myself and hopefully make some money off of it. But if I don't make money, then I can make money off tattooing, and at least I do something I enjoy.
Right. So how are you able to do all of it? Seriously, like
you just have to budget. You have to schedule your time. Like I know like every single day I go for like about a 10-mile bike ride. And
really,
that's people are like, I don't have time to do that. And I go to the gym every single day. And people are like, I don't have time to do that. But then they'll sit down, they'll play a video game for 3 hours.
I know.
It's like, well, you could do that if you weren't playing a video game for 3 hours. They're like, well, I needed this to relax. Well, after a while, that bike ride and that going to the gym helps you relax.
Right. Yeah, I talk about that a lot because like I just turned 40 a few months ago. I'm not getting any thinner. Got 2 kids, full-time job. I do this at night when my kids are sleeping. And it's like, it's always an excuse, right? Like it's an excuse if you say you can't work out or you can't do stuff like that. And I agree with that. Like I could get up earlier and I could do whatever, but like, I mean, and my daughter, by the time this comes out, she'll have just turned 1. So like my sleep schedule sucks. It's tough. Like, and you work all day, you come home, you do dinner with the kids, you do bath time, you do books before bed. When that's all over, it's like nice to like sit down with my wife and like talk about how our day was, or talk about our future, talk about our children's future, or just sit there like for an hour before we go to bed and watch TV just to kind of decompress and just kind of let all the stresses melt away, But you're right. I mean, it's an excuse.
Well, I think what happens, I think like probably the best way that I found to deal with it, like as far as like going for the run or going to the gym, I try to get up a little bit earlier and do that. Like I've done plenty of conventions with Ron, and my alarm will go off, and he's like, turn it off. It's like, but I need to wake up because I'm going to go to the gym and go for a run, and then I'll go to the convention. But because you got a little bit of exercise, a little bit of fresh air, you feel better. So like you can tolerate more, you can do more. Like I don't feel like it takes away from my time.
Sure. No, I mean, if it's important to you, it doesn't feel like it's intruding on stuff like that. Are you also into the ice baths and the saunas too?
I don't do the ice bath. I've done the sauna because I've had to lose weight for fights before. I'm not a big fan of the sauna, but I don't hate the sauna. It's just not something I do on a regular basis. I know Joe Rogan, a number of people talk about like, how much you can affect the body chemistry and stuff like that. I haven't really noticed that.
Yeah, they were saying that like, just being in the sauna increases your heart rate just by sitting there. And obviously it causes your body to adjust. But I think Ron's been working out recently, with at least the last year or two.
Well, he does. I've known Ron a long time.
Yeah.
And he does. And then, he gets off it and he gets back on it. I think even Ron will tell you I've done it consistently since I've known him. I've known him for over a decade.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to stop by. They just moved. I don't know how long ago it was, but like I said, I haven't seen Ron in a while. But
I think that like their home is still in the same place. It's in Kingston. But the shop was in downtown Wilkes-Barre, and finally, the last iteration of that shop kind of broke apart, and he opened a private studio in Kingston, and he has one person working there with him.
Oh, is that the setup now?
Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, he's very popular in this area. And I was outside this area too, but yeah, he's been that shop has been a staple for a long time.
Well, 570 tattooing.
Yeah,
That's yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
still called 570, but like I said, it's more of like a private
Private
studio.
studio, got it. Cool. Well, the book you just released, uh, is called "The End of the World."
Well, the End of the World is the last book I released. I have 3 novels out,
Right.
but what I've been working on recently is I did an anthology. So I do a lot of like illustrations for horror magazines and a lot of book covers for horror books. And I told a number of authors, I was like, I will give you one of the original illustrations I do, either for this book or that I've done previously for one of your stories, in exchange for a short story. So I had 14 different authors give me, short stories like 3,000 and 5,000 words, and I put together in an anthology. And some of them are fairly big names, some are fairly obscure. There were a couple people that I unfortunately had to turn down because I didn't like their stuff very much. But I really enjoyed the book, and by owning a tattoo shop, it gives me the freedom to have like a little bit more time to work on other projects. So like I illustrated every story and I did caricatures of all the artists involved, and I painted the front cover and painted the back cover, and I did a couple, extraneous illustrations there. So I'm pretty proud of it. And it's called The Never Dead. Just debuted on like Amazon. It'll be up in Audible in like 2 weeks.
Oh, so that's your newest.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why I thought "The End of the World" was the newest one.
Well, The End of the World is the newest one that I did by myself. That's like
Right.
a full novel by me.
Yeah.
And, I was hyping that a lot. And then I just did the anthology. So,
Right.
obviously I'm hyping the anthology a lot.
Of
And I put a
course.
lot
Yeah.
of time and effort into it.
That's so cool. I mean, what's that like having that kind of like library, so to speak, of like things that you've done and that you have like available for people to, either purchase or read or what's that like?
Well, I don't even look at it like that. I mean, I like that I have more rather than having less. Um, it's always a good feeling when people say, hey man, I love your artwork, and I have stuff like you can buy my stuff on Etsy, you can buy my stuff on Fine Art America, So when people buy prints of my stuff or T-shirts or whatever, I always enjoy that, and they often throw in a compliment, and I enjoy that as well. But I also enjoy writing. I love telling stories. But I also love when people like the tattoos I do. It's like I'm easy to please, is what I'm saying.
I imagine like being a visual artist like you are, kind of helps with those novels, being able to kind of like create that imagery for the reader.
Well, here's what it does. Like I have a podcast, so I talk to a lot of authors about this all the time. Many are not artists; they're authors. Although I would argue you do anything well, that's an art. But you have authors, and they don't visualize it probably the same way I do. So I'll give you, this sounds like an aside, but it's actually I think relevant. It's like I remember I read a fairly famous sci-fi book, and he's describing all this stuff that takes place, like light years away and other planets and strange new worlds and all, but he's describing nothing. So I'm like, I can't picture this at all. So as an artist, I have to be able to draw a picture of it. So I try and include that in my writing. I try and include, what the scene looks like what you see in front of you. And I actually try and whatever character it is, I try to be in their head, seeing through their eyes when I put it down on paper.
Yeah, I mean I think it all kind of ties together. And they always say, a starving artist, like a lot of people will say, don't go to school for arts, don't go to school for that kind of stuff. But I feel like
Parents says, yeah.
maybe you could speak to this. Like it's tough, right? I mean, art is so subjective. Like you can paint something or draw something or whatever it might be, or even a tattoo, and someone could say, "Oh, that to me is worth $5,000," and that somebody else could be worth $500, right?
Right.
But I mean, in this day and age, with everything we have at our fingertips, the internet, and you mentioned Etsy before. Like, do you think it? I imagine all those things kind of help an artist, display their work, share their work with, the entire world as opposed to the town they live in and things like that. Have you been able to really utilize those outlets to kind of further your brand?
Yeah, I think that definitely helps. I think most artists have a pretty heavy social media presence. So, like, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, and I have a website and I have a blog. And whenever I do, it's pretty easy because whenever I do anything, I'll make a post about it, including like the artwork and the text and all that. And I'll just cut and paste, between all the various social sites. But it's like, I feel like you gotta. I mean, the famous phrase, "You gotta fake it till you make it." So
That's what I'm doing.
yeah, that's I try and put everything out there. Like if the magazine has 3 readers, I don't care. I want to get myself out there because those 3 readers might be the ones that love my book so much that they talk to their friends in Hollywood about it, or you never know. But I think you should, like, if you're really trying to get something out there, I think it helps to like just throw as much out there and bombard all the airways with as much as you possibly can.
I say this a lot. It's when I'm guest on podcasts, and it tends to come up as well, and I talk about on this one a lot too. I always say it only takes one. It only takes
Right.
one person to see your art. It might take one person to see what I'm doing and maybe help me along my way, or a musician. It takes one person to hear one song that could take them to the next level. And hey, you know what? You agreed to do a podcast with 5 listeners, so thank you.
Well, the thing is, like, everybody that you hear that made it, that's like a big name now, they kind of made it by chance. So they just got into that lucky position, but it's not like they're just plodding along on the day and they just happened to the lucky position. It's like they were trying really hard and then something worked for them. Like Brad Pitt was like living in a car.
Mhm.
Like I remember Frank Frazetta, who's one of my favorites. And I was at art school. My art teacher was asking me, "Well, who do you look up to?" And I mentioned him. He said, "Well, for every Frazetta, there were 10 people that were even better that never made it." But what Frazetta did is, I remember he did. So there's a comic strip by Al Cap, and he was like kind of the ghost artist on that for 6 years. Then him and Al Cap, it was called Little Abner, and so they got in a fight about something, and he quit. And he goes, "Well, I'm famous. I've been doing this comic strip for 6 years." He could not get work. Nobody would hire him. And then he was good friends with Roy Crinkle, who did a bunch of book covers. And but Roy was he's really slow. And there was one, he's like, "I just don't think I'll have time to do it. Can you take a chance with my friend Frank?" And so they paid Frank like half what they would pay Roy, and they kept the original, but they got him in. And then after that, he just blew up. And then he was doing stuff for Playboy and for the movies, and and everybody knows who he is now.
It's crazy how things happen. I mean, are you on Threads now?
Am I on what?
Threads?
No, what stories?
Threads is the newest social media platform.
I've never even heard of it.
I just heard it for the first time maybe late last night and then into today. It's like I from what I understand, it's like a version. Well, it's owned by Meta, so Facebook, Instagram, and it's like their version of Twitter.
Okay.
So that Twitter's under this whole thing. They just got they're catching a lot of fire because they're limiting the amount of uh, tweets you can read. I think if you're verified, you can read like 6,000 tweets If you're not, it's like
were there more restrictions under Jack Dorsey and the left, and then Elon Musk bought it, and then now it's more. I don't know. I'm not a big Twitter guy.
I'm not either. I don't. I'm not a huge fan of Twitter, but so the logic behind it, or from what I understand, I'm not the smartest person in the world, and I just read about it today. Is Elon Musk and his team are trying to eliminate bots and fake accounts, which I mean, so I think what they're doing is good. They're trying to limit, like, these bots that are scrolling through pages and shit like that. So they're trying to limit people and how much they could kind of like absorb. Unless you're a verified account and you pay for that little check mark or whatever it might be.
And how much do you have to pay? Is it a lot?
I don't know what the cost is per month. I don't know that for sure. Again, it's one of those things, like, I don't use Twitter that often, so it's not really important to me. But I mean, I appreciate what he's doing, because there are so many fake accounts and hackers and bots. Like, if he could figure out a way to eliminate those, I'm all for that. But they're catching a lot of fire. His CEO, I forget her name, but she's under a lot of she's under the microscope right now. But like, I see the vision and I appreciate it, but we'll see what happens, because Meta, like I said, they just released their version of Twitter, I guess you could say, and it's quite easy. I signed up today, and then it's all tied to Instagram. You can literally, when you sign up, you could say, do you want to follow all of your Instagram followers, or do you want to follow all the people you follow on Instagram? I said yes. So I've been getting notifications all day from people who have been signing up, just saying, oh, you now follow so-and-so, you now follow Dan Henk, you now follow whoever, as they kind of filter into the system. So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
It was interesting. I'll have to check it out. Threads.
Yeah. By the time this airs, which will be next week, today is July 6th. So figure a week or so today. Threads might be old news. Who knows? they come and go, like there was Vine. Vine was hot for 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, you can't tell. Some stuff takes off and you're like, why that? Why did that take off?
I don't know, man. I don't know if you're on TikTok and things like that, and like, it just, like, the amount of the videos that I see that have millions of views, it's like, how does this have?
I am on TikTok. It's like, maybe I'd have more views if I wore a tutu and did a little dress, whatever. But like, I just post myself on there.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I started cutting these into reels. I've been posting those. I mean, it's just another outlet. Again, it's, you never know. You can find one video that goes viral or whatever it might be. But it's a lot, man. It's a lot to do on your own. You're constantly posting on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and now Threads, and you're doing martial arts, you're tattooing, and you own a shop. Where do you find the time to do all this stuff? It's like, give me a break.
Well, if there are certain things that I feel like I want to accomplish, and if I put one off for too long, I feel like something's missing. Like, if it's been too long since I've written or drawn, or tattooed, I feel like there's a hole in my life. So I definitely work on it. And one thing, more and more, I'm doing the writing, and the drawing for other authors now than I've ever done before, and that's very fulfilling to me. And I remember. So sorry to backtrack on this, but back in 2001, I had brain cancer. So I was in the hospital when the Twin Towers went down.
Shit.
Yeah, I was in ICU in Bellevue, which is the closest hospital to the Twin Towers, when they went down. And you don't sleep in ICU. So I remember, when they first announced it, everyone thought it was like a accident, like a plane crashed into one of the towers. And then when the second tower was hit, they're like, oh, wait, it's terrorism. And for some reason, the TV stopped working, so we're hearing everything on the radio, and then the TV, it's all Spanish TV, but we're seeing the pictures. And I remember the nurses kind of freaking out and running around. And I'm like, I'll leave. And they're like, sit down. He's like, I'm in a bed with my head wrapped up like the Invisible Man, like a brain plug coming out. But it was kind of surreal. Like when I got out, like 4 days later, like the air's all smoky and like paper's still coming down, like scratched paper. People are walking down the street crying and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it looked like something from like, The Walking Dead or, The Stand. But I think like that, and then my wife dying and didn't run, kind of lit a fire in my ass. It's like, you really got to get on this shit because life is fucking short.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus, you really hit me with a lot there. Yeah, I mean, first of all, like that's terrible. Talk about that. So not only did you have brain cancer, you had brain cancer during a terrorist attack on the United States, right?
Right.
I mean, talk in that was at this point 22 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So that puts you what, late 20s, early 30s?
Exactly. Yeah, late 20s.
I mean, was that diagnosed like suddenly, or did you like how did that all like? So real quick, like today, as Dan Henk today, successful, tattoo shop owner, just artist, creator, author. I mean, you're doing very well, and you seem like you're fulfilled just with everything that you do, which is amazing, right? Like, so let's go back 22 years ago. You have brain cancer. Was that diagnosed suddenly, or what was that like?
Well, at the time I was doing Judo, which is Bruce Lee's martial art, and that's another one I'd recommend for your son. It's basically, it's not a martial art like karate where it has a specific curriculum. It's more whatever works. So we did Muay Thai, we did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we did Pantukan, which is Filipino dirty boxing. We did Kali Eskrima, which is stick and knife fighting. And so I was doing all that stuff, and I was very much into that, like doing seminars and, training all the time. Like Miguel Diaz gave me my blue belt in jiu-jitsu, and Kareem was our Muay Thai teacher. And then I started getting headaches. And at the time, I'd been tattooing for about 2 years. And, I was like, I take an aspirin, then go to work. And then eventually the headache started coming back. So then I take an aspirin in the morning and an aspirin at night. And after 2 weeks, I was like, this isn't normal. Something's going on. Right. So I went to a clinic, but, I was broke at that time. So I went to like a local Spanish clinic, and, they said, oh, well, you have migraines. We have free medicine. We'll give you a sample. Oh, wait, we don't. But I'll write you a prescription. So I took the prescription to a local pharmacy. They couldn't even read the handwriting. They're trying to call the guy. He won't pick up the phone. They said, go to a better clinic. So I went to a better clinic, and they pumped me full of saline solution. They said, oh, you're probably dehydrated. Call us tomorrow if things are worse. And the next day I was like me and my girl, had Chinese food the night before. So I was like throwing it up. I felt like I had a jackhammer to the back of my head. I was like leaning over the sink. I wanted to put a gun in my mouth and just end it. I was like, I can't deal with this. Fuck this. And she kept calling and calling. And finally, when she got them, they're like, go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and they're like, what did you do? I said, Muay Thai. They go, oh, it's a brain bleed. So they put me in a CAT scan. They go, oh, wait, it's cancer. And I was like, okay. And they're like, so, it's a slow growing tumor about golf ball size. It wasn't in the brain. It was like beside the brain. It was like pressing against it, which is why I had all these headaches.
Sure. Yeah.
And they're like, probably in about 2 weeks, it would like split open, and it's all necrotic tissue on the inside. So you would die. So we've got to operate on you right away. Like they had to wait 4 days to do MRIs with contrast and all that sort of stuff. And so they said, yeah, we've got to operate on you right away. And you have about a 50-50 chance of making it. I was like, okay. My girl's like, you don't care. She started crying. I'm like, well, of course I care, but what am I going to do?
Right.
like I remember me and my parents don't get along, but I remember I called my parents and I told them, they're like, well, we come see you, but last minute tickets are expensive. So then, I had surgery, and unless we were living in the Matrix, I lived. So, then I'm in ICU recovering when the Twin Towers went down.
What was going? What was going through your head? I mean, like that seems like a pretty like big whirlwind of information. Like you go from having headaches to, oh, you have brain cancer, we need to do surgery now. Your parents are like, yeah, you'll be fine. Tickets are expensive. Like, what was it like? Were you at any point were you like ready to, like, if this is the end, this is the end? Like, how did you kind of comprehend all that?
Well, I can have like, I feel like everything I've done in life, I had to fight to get there. Like my parents are super conservative, they're super religious. Like I had to go to church 4 times a week when I was a kid. Um, I had like, there's like a Christian version of the Boy Scouts called Northern Frontiers. I had to go there. Then when I got into punk rock, they said, well, obviously there's something wrong with you. So they're trying to send me to psychiatrists all the time. And, I feel like everything I've had to do, I had to fight for it. So when something like brain cancer came up, I'd only been tattooed in 2 years. I was like, well, I'm not going to, like, even while I was undergoing chemotherapy and all that stuff, I was still working 3 days a week. I was still going to the gym, and I'd get I'd bike to the Hespel Center, which is where I get chemotherapy. And, they're like, did you bike here? I'm like, yeah, you can't give up. You can't give up. But I feel that's the way it is. Like, 'cause if you fail, if you die and you don't do anything, the only one that really cares is you.
Right.
So I just feel like, you have two choices. Either you can wallow in your misery or you can try and make something work.
Now, I'm guessing that was after you were homeless too.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, do you want to hear the homeless story?
Yeah, dude, I want to hear all of it. I mean, so I'm glad we got the important stuff out of the way, and I say important loosely. Talking about who you are today, and that the all the success that you've had, but like all that happened, outside of all these bad things happening, like or unfortunate situations, like you had literally risen from the ashes. Really, it's insane. I love those stories, and I love those moments, because there's not a lot of people out there who could do that. I mean, it happens, right? Like people do that a lot, but like it's rare. It's less than normal, maybe. I don't know. Like, talk about you're homeless. Like,
Well, my parents are very conservative, and like I'm sure they voted for Trump. They've always voted nothing but Republican the whole way, and they're very religious too. And I'm more like, I was a punk rocker. I'm very libertarian. I'm just like, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. Everybody leave everybody alone. And my parents, I remember they used to tell me, they're like, until you turn 18, you're under our rule. So we tell you what to do. Like, I remember they locked up my brother for the entire summer in a mental institute just because he was a punk rocker. And I think that fucked him up. He died of an overdose this year. But like, I saw the change in him after that. It's like they're like, it's not even a matter of like, hey, we'll tell you what we're into and try and guide you. It was like, you have to be exactly like we want you to be, or else. So I remember, like, I was in starting high school down in Florida. My dad was stationed down there, and I remember there were a lot of like local comic shops, and I go there and like, they critique my art. Like there were some indie artists there, they did like indie black and white comic books. And, I get a lot of like back and forth from them. And I was into like metal, like, Metallica and Megadeth and stuff. Sure. So I didn't look that crazy, but then I got heavily into punk rock. We moved to Virginia, and that's when I had like the mohawk and the leather jacket and all that stuff. And, like black eyeliner, and I remember first of all, my dad would look at me like, I can't believe you're related to me,
Right.
and they tried to get stricter and stricter. I think they kind of figured I was a lost cause, and my brother is 3 years younger, which is why they put him in a mental institute. But like it was like everything they did was just trying to hold you down and make you follow their pattern. And I was like, if you're going to be happy with anything, you've got to fight to do your own thing. And that I feel like that's like this is going to sound really dramatic, but I feel like my whole life I've been fighting. You got to fight to be what you are. So when anything would come up, rather than go, oh man, that's unfortunate, I'm just like, all right, that's a speed bump. How do I get past this?
I don't think that's dramatic at all. Like the shit that, I mean, you've gone through, like that's, it's one of those things. And I think people are successful because of the shit that they've had to overcome. Like,
well, there might be an aspect to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like that's not the only reason, but like, it's so admirable. Like when someone has, overcome all those obstacles too, like, it's made them who they are today, right? But they've also
it definitely, it makes you who you are. Yeah.
But it's like it's also crazy to think about like parents, and I'm not talking about your parents specifically, but like how parents can be like that to their children. Like you're this way, you're out of the house, or you're they weren't, and I get it, it's a generational thing too. Like I think we're constantly kind of trying to overcome those things. And I mean, I'm a very hands-on dad. And I pride myself.
Some people go too far the other way. Like they just like, they're like, dude, wherever you can't be too lax with them.
Sure, of course. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
But there's a difference between, not being too lax with them, but kind of letting them express themselves within boundaries and, trying to clamp down on them to make them robots just the way you want them to be.
Well, yeah. I mean, like you said, your brother passed away from overdose. Like that's terrible. And you think it's because of your parents putting him into
they put him in a mental institute for being a teenage punk rocker.
And I mean, it's music. Like that's sad. That's sad to hear.
Well, I'm sure he's doing in their eyes, the typical teenage rebellious stuff. Sometimes skipping school, sometimes, hanging out with friends and maybe shoplifting a CD or something, but not all the time. It's not like, he's right. It's just like, that's what kids do.
Kids do stupid shit. We all do stupid shit. I mean, I don't even I would love to share a story, but I don't want to just because if my kid ever hears it. But maybe I'll tell you when we're done. But like some of the stuff that I've done, like I'm not proud of, but you don't think about the 20 years later. You don't think that far ahead. And as long as you're not hurting anybody, if not you're not like physically hurting anybody, like what's the problem?
Wait, well, my dad, this is a very, he got this from the Bible, I'm sure, he quotes this all the time, spare the rod, spoil the child, and so I remember, he made, he would give us spankings all the time, but he made this, piece of wood, and, he was very proud of it, so proud he tells about it, oh, it doesn't bend, see how strong it is, and he just, whack you as hard as he could with it, and they just said I ran away from home twice. I remember before I turned 18, they had my grandparents, which were missionaries in Africa, over, and they went through all my stuff. So I came home from work one day, and all my stuff was on the dinner table, and they're deciding what I get to keep and what I don't get to keep. And there was a huge pile of what I did get to keep. So I ran back to my room and got my backpack and ran out and stuffed all in there and ran to a friend's house. So for the entire rest of my senior year of high school, it was at my friend's house. And then when I turned 18, which is, halfway through my senior year of high school, they said, all right, you're out of the house. And a good friend, his mom, he had a single mom, and she was going to let me stay in their spare bedroom. And then after 3 days, they go, well, we decided if you don't graduate, you'll probably never make anything of yourself. So, they let me back in the house, but I had to keep the room like a guest bedroom now. Like always, like make the bed perfectly, vacuum the floor, no posters on the walls. All my stuff still had to stay at my friend's house because I couldn't have any of my like crazy punk rock stuff there. And then I graduated high school and I quit my job to take finals. And then they kicked me out of the house. So like I was homeless for like 8 months, like living in the woods, homeless. And then I crawled back up from there.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. I mean, yeah, I've never experienced anything really hard. And I'm so thankful for that. But in the same sense, I'm just like,
I'm not saying oh poor me, by the way.
No, dude,
I'm just saying
dude,
don't treat your
all.
kids like that.
No. I'm not. I don't, and I don't think any of my listeners will think that either. Like, not at all. It's like I respect that so much because I mean I'm so fortunate in my life that I've never had to do anything like that. Like I don't know, like maybe at that age I would have figured it out, but like I look back on it, who I am now, like if I was in that situation, what would I have done? I don't know. And there's people like that. There's people, you did it, you overcame it. But there's people out there every day that are doing that same shit, and it's crazy to think about. It's crazy to think that like someone's parents might just disapprove of, the music they listen to, or, they want to go be an artist and they want to go to an art school or whatever it might be. Like, and there's parents out there who are like, if you do that, you're not going to amount to anything in life. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah, I remember they told me art is not a career. And actually, my guidance counselor, because we were in a fairly conservative area for my last years of high school, and I went to my guidance counselor because I couldn't get anyone to co-sign a loan for college. And so I was asking her, are there any is there anything I can do? Are there any grants or anything? And she said, get ready for a career of pumping gas because that's all you'll ever do.
Yeah. I mean, the guidance counselors I had when I was in school, terrible. I don't know how they got paid or why they got paid. They didn't guide. And I'm sorry if they ever hear this or see this. They probably won't. But that they just like, no, it's like I don't know, man. Like I remember if you weren't valedictorian and top of your, top 5 of your class, like they didn't care. They didn't try guiding you, and they would try and guide those guys and girls that were top to like these Ivy League schools and shit like that. Like, and I think education is so weird, especially today with how things are, and the internet exists, and you can learn a lot just by going on YouTube, and it's so.
I think they were a lot more judgmental back in those days too.
100%.
Like my SCTs were high enough to get into Harvard. Like that's what they told me. My GPA was 4.0. I had almost photographic memory. So I like on paper I did really well, but it didn't matter because I had like a mohawk and
right.
I looked funny.
Yeah, so they're like, oh well, this guy, we're not gonna like try and guide him in the right direction because he's gonna be a loser. Like
yeah,
like guidance counselors back in the day, like in my opinion, were terrible. They should never have jobs and they were. I don't even know if they were qualified. It seems like it just.
Well, I still remember her face. I remember what she looked like. I remember her name. It's like fuck that person.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it was so black and white for them. It was just like, if you looked funny, like, don't talk to me. Like, you need good grades. Like, you need to be that like, collared, dressed up 4.0 student to go on to the next level, and that's so far from the truth. I mean, this world is such a bad place. I mean, when I was in school, they're like, "Oh, don't do a trade. Like, we work, use your brains, not your hands." Now, like we're in a place now where like trades are suffering, and then people who are in trades, they could name their price.
Like electricians or plumbers make way more than most people who got a degree in education or something like that.
Yes, absolutely. Like they can name their prices. It's going to be $100 just for them to walk in the door.
Yeah.
And they have minimal student debt because they weren't in school for 4+ years. And I mean, they're in demand. Like you can't find someone good to, work on your house. Like you do, be an
I'm
electrician.
big on trade schools. That was the whole like education counselor thing. Like, don't go to trade school, go to college.
That's what I'm saying.
But
That's
then
exactly
you'll
what
be
I'm
in college debt and you'll have no career. While meanwhile, the guy who went to trade school is set for life.
They didn't tell you that. They didn't tell you about the debt.
Yeah.
It's gotten so much worse. I mean, these kids are going to school and they're not even thinking about it. They're like, oh, I was told to go to school. They're going into $250,000 in debt or more. And they get out and they're like, I mean, yeah, I might make good money, but they're not paying that shit back because the interest is so fucking high. It's crazy. It's fucking crazy. But we can go on about that all day. But so you're homeless 8 months. You kind of you figured it out. What happened when you got out of that situation? Like, what did you find somewhere to live?
Out of being homeless?
Yeah.
Well, the first job I got was at Chuck E. Cheese. So like I borrowed someone's clothes to go to the interview, and pretty much Chuck E. Cheese has very, very low standards. So they're also an incredibly horrible place to work for. So I worked for them for about 2 weeks, and then I found a better job selling tuxedos, which is kind of funny because even with the mohawk and looking that way, like I would sell way more tuxedos than anybody else because they didn't come off as a used car salesman.
Right.
It's like I just talked to them like a normal person, and they're like, okay, and this was a slightly more like blue collar area. So that's what people wanted. They didn't want the guy who was all slick and, would like put on a show for them. They felt like he's he's taking something from them. But yeah, and I quit Chuck E. Cheese by calling from another job and saying, yeah, I'm going to quit. And they're like, oh, you want to put in your 2 weeks? I'm like, no, I'm at my other job right now.
And we're done now. Yeah.
So then I worked there. And then, I mean, I did everything. I was like a dishwasher. I went door to door for Greenpeace. I worked as a telemarketer. I worked at a place called, it was called Kick Ash. And you call people and they go, kick ass. They're like, no, he's Kick Ash, And I remember, who Ian MacKay is, like the guy from Fugazi and Minor Threat.
Heard him before, yeah.
Well, I called and he answers, and I go, "Is this Ian MacKay from like Fugazi and Minor Threat?" He's like, "Don't tell anyone." But he's like, "Yeah, we don't have a chimney." But yeah, so I did a whole bunch of jobs, and then finally I went to community college for art, and like. I worked 2 jobs, got around on like a shitty little motorcycle. Like, how hard it is to bounce art supplies in your handlebars?
I don't know, but.
And then I moved to New York City with everything I owned in a backpack on a motorcycle. And I had a friend who lived in Queens, and I rented a room. And sometimes you just got to take a chance to make it.
Yeah, I mean, if you overcome a lot of shit and you push through, and I mean that's why you make it, because you do things that normal people wouldn't do, So good for you.
Like I said, I'm not unique, but a lot of people who did make it followed kind of the same path.
Yeah.
Like Brad Pitt or like
Sure.
J.K. Rowling, who's like the richest lady in the UK.
Yep.
She was homeless living on her friend's couch.
I mean, you hear stories about comedians like they are successful and funny because they went through, like, they had shitty parents or they moved around a lot or whatever, X, Y, Z. Like they had to like be put through the ringer, so to speak, and overcome that and make it through. And as long as you harness that negativity for a positive and push through and recognize that, I mean, you could do a lot of great things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it like I said, nobody cares if you die except for you. Yeah. So it really helps to have a vision and push for it. And whether you accomplish that through one avenue or another avenue, you just got to keep back in the day, like back in the 40s, people would have like 4 or 5 jobs before they finally made it. So even if you talk to people who end up being like, Carnegie or Rockefeller or whatever, they did all these other jobs that they failed miserably at, and they just kept going.
Yeah. And I don't want to bring this up again, but it was something you said that caught me off guard. Like your wife died in a hit and run?
Yeah, I was married, and I was married for 6 years, and she was taking music classes at Pratt, which is in Brooklyn, and we lived in Brooklyn, so she'd leave early in the morning on Saturday, and the area you go through is right next to downtown Manhattan, which has all the after-hour bars. So, if I had to guess, I would say that probably somebody was drunk from the night before,
Sure.
and they came over, and she was on a motorcycle, and they just plowed into her. Like they hit her so hard they took out their headlight, took out most of their front grill, and they just kept going. And like they hit her, and she flew off the bike, landed on her head, and snapped her neck.
Wow.
And they just kept going. And there are industrial warehouses in the area, so they got the surveillance tapes, but the cameras mostly focused on the very entrance to the warehouse. So what they would get would be fairly blurry, so they couldn't even make out the license plate. And we were trying really hard to pursue it, to do something about it. First, the cops were blowing it off. Totally like it turns out that if a motorcyclist gets in an accident and it was their fault, there's less paperwork. At least that's what I've heard. And they're just blowing it off. So we hired an attorney. He said, you know what? Picture as a model, because she did some alternative modeling. So I pictured them all of a sudden it's everywhere. It's like a tragedy. I got interviewed for News One, News Five, and she was Colombian. So my brother-in-law speaks Spanish. He was like on Telemundo and Univision. And he was like talking about it. All of a sudden there's an investigative squad. People are calling me from all over. Yeah, a car just rolled in my body shop and they look like this. And, I mean, unfortunately, no one was ever found, but
Yeah.
that's like a little piece of it. It was a whole long dramatic thing.
Yeah. Jesus. And you got stabbed by a crackhead.
Well, that was before that. Yeah, that was
Okay. Well, timeline's a little off, but yeah, talk about that. Like, what the fuck?
Well, I lived in DC and I worked at punk rock restaurants, like owned by a punk rocker, Dante Ferrando. If you ever heard that Agnostic Front song, Crucified, it's a cover actually. It's from the band Iron Cross, and he was the drummer in that band Iron Cross. So he owned this restaurant and first started as the dishwasher there, then I was a cook, then the busboy, then eventually the waiter there. And but none of it paid very well. So I was living in downtown DC, and even if you live in mediocre, decent areas in DC, it's still super dangerous. And so I would this is a rule in DC: you're not allowed to own a firearm, but you're allowed to have a knife. You just there are requirements. It's it has to be visible, but you can't be displaying it. So it has to be in a sheath, like on your belt where people can see it. And so that actually, I had a big K-bar knife, and that probably saved me from being robbed and mugged so many times. But I was at my house, and it was in a bad area, but we had a gate. Like most houses in that area had a gate around them just because it's so dangerous, and I lived with my girlfriend at the time, and her sister from the suburbs came to live with us. And her sister, she was oblivious. She walked her white fuzzy little dog around the block at midnight. Two crackheads came up to her, and they were trying to get money from her. And she was like, she didn't have anything on her. She just went out to walk her dog. She's like, and one acted like he had a gun in his hand or in his pocket, and one had a knife he was displaying. And she's like, I don't have any money. And they're like, oh, well, you have money in there. So they made her key into the place and go in. And I guess the guy with the knife got sketched out. But the guy with the gun, he didn't really have a gun, but he was acting like he had one. He got inside, and once he got inside the house, I had an open toolbox. He ran over, grabbed a hammer, grabbed her neck. It was holding a hammer to her head, like he was going to bash her brains in. And she starts calling up to us, and my girlfriend's name was Barbara, and she's like calling, but she's like, and we're like, yeah, we'll get down in a minute. But then she keeps calling, and it gets more hysterical. We're like, what the fuck? So I go wandering down the steps, and I see this crackhead holding her with a hammer like this. and his eyes like they have jaundice. They're like all yellow, and he's like not even looking straight. I'm like, hey man, what do you want? And he's like, he doesn't even talk right. He's like, I wanted money. I'm like, well, she doesn't have any. He's like, but you do. So he like edges over with her. He's like, give it to me, give it to me. So I'm like emptying out my pocket. I'm like, I just got change, man. I got change. So he apparently he doesn't trust me. So he's trying to pat me down, and he feels a knife, and he goes for the knife. I'm like, I'm not letting a crackhead get a knife. So like with one hand, I'm like grabbing the knife, and with the one hand, he tried to swing the hammer, hit me in the head with the hammer. So I'm holding the hammer, and I'm banging his head against the wall, and he's trying to stab me. And like I was wearing a flight jacket, and there are like all these little puncture wounds in it. We're just trying to stab me in the stomach. And I had like all these little cuts on my stomach, but it didn't go all the way through, obviously. And we had the heavy end of a pool cue, and my girl came down. She smashes him as hard as she can in the head, and he's so high, and whatever he's on, he's like, and after like the 7th time of hitting him, he looks at her like, bitch, I'll kill you. So she goes running upstairs, and she calls the cops, and she's like, help, my boyfriend is getting attacked by a crackhead, blah, blah. And they're like, if you don't calm down, we're going to hang up on you. So she's like, no, please, just come help us. There was a police station less than a block away. It took him 45 minutes to get there. So Jesus. I'm fighting with the crackhead. Finally, he's like trying to stab me with the knife, and my hand's wrapped around it, and it's sawing all the way through the bone, all the way through the tendon. But I finally get the knife, and I go to hit him. But one of these giant Harley boots are like steel-toed and steel heel. And I'm trying to chase him, and, he's obviously wearing sneakers and a crackhead, so he's like super fast running away. So I didn't catch him. Oh, and the entire time I was like kicking him as hard as I could in the shins with steel-toed boots. So I'm sure the next day he could barely even walk. Yeah. But he's so high right there, that like it's not affecting him. Yeah. But so the cop comes in, you could tell they could care less. So first they call from across the street. They're like, is he still there? We're like, no, he's not there. So then they come in, and he has his like, folder flipped out. He's like, so what do he look like? I was like, I don't know. He's a fucking crackhead, puffy orange jacket, Like, well, do you have darker skin than I do? Like you could tell they could care less. They're like, well, don't confront him if you see him. And I'm thinking, I'm going to kill him if I see him, But and then he's like, oh, that cut looks pretty bad. I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. He's like, oh yeah, move your finger. And I tried it. I could not move my finger because like the tendon was severed. Right. And he's laughing. He's like, I thought so.
Jesus Christ.
And so then he's like, you want me to call you a cab or call you an ambulance? And I'm like, no. So I called a cab, and I wrapped a towel around it. And I went to George Mason, which is the closest hospital. It's like a university hospital, but it's mainly like rich people go to George Mason. So first, they demanded money up front. Apparently, hospitals can't do that anymore. But I had $97, which I was a dishwasher, so that was a lot of money to me. But I emptied my pockets, gave him $97. It disappeared, by the way. It's not in paperwork, anything. But so then they took me in, and they just sewed it closed. I'm like, well, don't I need surgery to reattach the tendon? And like they started laughing at me, And they put like students to sew it up, so they didn't even sew it up correctly. Because they figured I didn't have insurance, so they didn't put like a specialist on it. So I'm like, is there a public hospital anywhere around here? And they're like, oh, well, there's one in Southeast, which is like the worst part of DC. And I'm like, all right, fine, I'll go there. So I remember I would take the train there, and I'd take the bus there, and it was a bus, actually. The train would just go to Virginia. But I'd take the bus there, and I remember first of all, I'm like the only white person around. Although the thing is, like, even like really ghetto black people, they love that you look so punk rock. They'd be like, oh man, I love your haircut. So but I go to the hospital, and it's right next to the DC jail. So there'd be people with leg irons walking past me, and I remember that the week before, this is when DC, by the way, was really bad. This is like the Marion Barry years, like the guy caught on tape with like smoking crack with a hooker. Yeah. But I remember when they did the surgery, like the week before, they had a lady, they had amputated her foot. They amputated the wrong foot. So I was trying to get them to like let me stay a week while they did the surgery so I could make sure they're operating on the right hand. They wouldn't let me. So I remember right before I passed out, like this rusty looking light is coming down, and then I'm out. So when this is turning into a long story, but so like there was a cut all the way through here, so they had to cut this open to reattach the tendon.
Right.
And I know because there was a therapist doing an internship there from New York, and he's like, "What did they do?" Because they're supposed to put 19 stitches, they put 4. Like it was still like parts were hanging open. They're supposed to glue fishing line to your nail and attach to your cast so you can't move while the tendon heals. They forgot glue. So in the hospital, they punched a hole through my finger and they tied fishing line and they attached to the cast. And the lady making the cast, she had like these long nails on. So it took her forever to make the cast, but she makes it way too short. And the doctor comes in, he's like, "Yeah, the cast is way too short." So she starts arguing with him. So after like 40 minutes of arguing, then she makes it cast on purpose. It's way too long. And then he comes in and is like, "Now you made the cast way too long." And she starts arguing with him, and he's like, "Fine, that'll do." So that's what I ended up with.
Jesus Christ. Dan. I mean, I feel like your life has just been a constant battle with adversity.
Well, I just feel like the roadblocks are like what you got to go through. Like not everyone has to go through, but if you're struck with those, what are you gonna do? Either you give up or you keep fighting. And maybe I'm just too stubborn, but I just keep fighting.
Yeah, I mean, like what? Like after you get kicked in the dick, time after time, like what keeps you going? Like what keeps you like it's just another shit sandwich I got to eat. Like it'll all be worth it one day. Like what's going through your head through all these moments? Like I feel like if all these things happen to somebody else, right? And then so I'm gonna say this, not even a comparison, but I'll say it to kind of tie together. I do, and I don't know if you're a religious person. It sounds like you're probably not because of the way things kind of happen. But I was raised, not in the church, but I'm Lutheran. I took all the religious courses and what is it called? I was at confirmation classes and things like that, and it got to a point where my best friend's dad passed away early. He was like 50 or maybe 51 or 52. Then 2 months after that, my grandmother passed away. Then 2 months after that, my other grandmother passed away. And then 6 months after that, my own father passed away. So I dealt with a lot of losses in an 8-month period. And I'm like, you know what? I think, I need to kind of step back from religion because this God they speak of wouldn't do this to me. Like, how could this possibly happen? Right? We're good people, blah, blah. We do the right things, like whatever. And then I was like, maybe he did that to me because he knew that I could handle it. You know what I'm saying? Like he felt that I can't do this to somebody else because they would go down the wrong path. They would go down the wrong road. They'd end up like killing somebody or killing themselves or drugs or whatever it might be. I'm going to do this to you because I know that you have family around you, you have friends around you, and you're a strong person. You can handle this scenario. Again, I'm not going to compare to religion, but like people that go through what you've gone through would be like I don't like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's crazy. What kept you going? That's what I'm kind of getting at.
Well, like I remember when I was homeless and I kind of felt like I was like at the bottom of the ladder, falling away from society. Like I remember like I'd be starving, and somebody gave me $2, and I bought like a big bag of rice. So in a friend's microwave in his trailer at college, like they had, more people than rooms, so he like lived in a trailer. Like this is George Washington University, and or George Mason University rather. And so in his microwave, I cook rice from the $2 bag of rice, and then I seal like salt and pepper from McDonald's, and I like put that in there, and I survived off that for a couple of weeks, And but the whole time, and I was taking showers at McDonald's restrooms, you know, but washing everything in McDonald's restroom. But like the whole time, I'm like, this is not the end of me. I have stuff I want to do. Like, how do I get out of this? I never once go, oh, poor me. It was like, because nobody cares.
Right.
So, going, oh, poor me is definitely not going to get me anywhere. So I go, what do I need to do to get out of this? So that's how I kept applying to jobs. Like most of them would just turn down right away. But finally Chuck E. Cheese hired me. And like Chuck E. Cheese would hire almost anybody at the time. Like they had a lot of people. Like I won't go into all of it and bore you, but they have a lot of tricks they play about how much money you're gonna make. But like they don't give you a shift meal. They tell you you're gonna get tips because you're a waiter, but they have signs through where they say waiters are paid, don't tip them. All sorts of things. But it was like that got me away from being homeless. And then I'm like, okay, well now that I have a job, I just need to find a better one. So just keep trying until something works.
Maybe it goes back to what we said before. It just takes one. And maybe that, as shitty as that Chuck E. Cheese job was, that was the one thing that started you on the right path.
Right. Well, if there was no Chuck E. Cheese, then I would have been fucked. I feel like I would have found something eventually, but
sure, of course.
I need something like that.
Yeah. Fucking Chuck E. Cheese, man. Man, what a story. Damn. So what's next for Dan Henk?
Well, I just put out this horror anthology, The Never Dead, which I'm really proud of. Like I put it out like an Audible, I put it on Kindle, I put it out in paperback, I put it out in hardcover, and I'm doing a bunch of horror conventions. We have a guy who's on one of those FX shows. I forget what it is, but he went to Tom Savini School, so he does awesome special effects. And we were asking him we were going to make a book trailer, and like they're all like horror short stories. So like the ones with more like difficult elements, we were getting him. He's like, "Why don't I do the whole thing?" We're like, "Okay, awesome, man." And I'm like, "I will tattoo you for free if you do the whole thing." But he's really good, so he's going to shoot this horror trailer. So right now, that's what I'm really into. That's what I'm dedicating a lot of time to. And I feel like I'll give it my all. If it doesn't work out, then I'll try something else. But right now, I'm going to give it 100%. And you've got to assume that everything is going to be the best. You can't go, oh well, this probably isn't going to go anywhere. Because if you think that, it's not going to go anywhere.
Right. And you have a shop called Abyss Art Studio in Long Beach, New York?
Yeah. It's the technical name is the Abyss Fine Art and Tattoo Studio.
It's a lot of words.
Yeah.
I mumble, so I'm going to go with Abyss.
I got to be complex. You just call it the Abyss if you want.
The Abyss. Let's go with that. Yeah, I tend to mumble, so we're going to go with the Abyss. Where can people find you on socials?
I'm on everything. My website is danhenk.com. I'm Dead Guy LLC, which is my company. I incorporated on the advice of Keith Underwood. He apprenticed under Mike Malone, a pretty famous tattoo artist. But he said, this country is set up for corporations. So I incorporated, so like my artwork, and now I'm publishing under the name. So Dead Guy LLC on Facebook, Dead Guy LLC on Instagram, Dan Henk on TikTok, Dan Henk, on the website, Dan Henk on Twitter. I'm on too many social platforms.
What's your Instagram? Because that's going to be your handle for Threads.
Dead guy LC.
You'll be on Threads. By the time this comes out, you'll be on Threads.
I was, funny stories real quick. I was Dan Henk on Instagram. Somebody hacked my account. So all of a sudden, like, and I know from like the return address they changed it to, it was somebody in Russia. So there was some young girl just like posting selfies on my site, and the people were like writing and they're going, "We know this isn't Dan Henk." And I wrote TikTok, and they're like, they had you like they send you a code and it hold up like a thing with the code. They never gave it back.
Yeah.
I went through all those channels, nothing happened. But they finally just closed that account down, and I started new one. So, which is kind of unfortunate because I had like 17,000 followers, and now I have like 3,000.
That's what sucks about that shit. It's like you could like build it up to this level, and you get hacked once, and it's gone.
Yeah,
gone forever. It's like, damn.
Unfortunately, it wasn't like softcore porn or something, which probably would have like affected me more.
Yeah. You'd be bigger. But well, Dan, your timeline, your stories, like what you've been able to overcome to be who you are today is, like I said before, admirable. Like, I mean, a lot of people would have gave up, and you didn't, and good for you. I mean, I couldn't imagine. But there's people out there like you, and they have a great story to tell, and they are an impactful person in people's lives, and I think that you definitely are that. Whether it's sharing your story, or tattooing that piece that somebody wants on their body, or drawing the picture, or writing those novels, like it's super cool what you do, and I just appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
We'll have to hook up next time you come back. If you ever come back to town with 570, I know it's more of a private studio, but if you ever come back, let me know.
Well, I'm sure Ron's invited me, and I've done like 10 guest spots at his shop. Right. I'm sure at some point it will.
I'll come hang out. We'll meet face to face in real life.
Okay, awesome, man.
Well, thank you again. I appreciate it, and keep on keeping on, man. It's your story's awesome, and you should be super proud.
All right, thanks, man.
All right, later.
Later.